And good evening, everyone. Welcome to ESS, Empire State Sports, and the Wise Guy Sports Talk Show. Your host tonight, Joey Riom, Dave Bartlett, myself, Pete Goslaw, and our very special guest, Sandy Caligiore. Now, I'm going to tell everybody what I know about Sandy, and then Sandy's going to give us a little bio of himself. Now, Sandy, you were the former voice of Clarkson hockey, and a lot of people won't know this. You were the broadcaster of the Miracle on Ice, correct?
Yes, I was fortunately, being in the right place at the right time with all the stars aligning. I worked locally at the time for WNBZ Radio in Saranac Lake, just 10 miles from home. And we had made a commitment from the time the games were awarded in 1974 to cover all the developments related to the Winter Olympics. And that pertained to getting the bid and then all the events, the test events leading right up to the games in February 1980. We started covering the hockey team actually in August of 79 when they gathered in Lake Placid to select their team. And it wasn't the final team, but it was the nucleus of the 1980 team that they picked in the summer of 79. And then they went out on the road and they played an ambitious 60 game exhibition schedule. They came to Lake Placid in October of 79 and played the Washington Capitals. And we broadcast that game. So that was fortuitous. And then came back 2 months later, December 79, for the pre Olympic tournament. And uh, I'm not sure that you're aware, but at the Olympics, summer and or winter, all the venues need to be tested with an official international event to declare that the venue is good to go. So December 79 was the test of the Olympic Center in Lake Placid. The team showed up. It was the U.S. Olympic team, but they were playing against basically JV teams, B teams. The Czechs, Canadians, Russians, they did not bring their Olympic teams. Nevertheless, the U.S. won that tournament, the pre-Olympic tournament. We broadcast that. And then they departed, returning in January, late January, early February. And of course, the memorable game was at Madison Square Garden when the Russians beat the U.S. 10-3. And at that point, people figured, okay, so the Russians will win the gold medal, and maybe the U.S. can win a bronze. And of course, history went in a different direction. And we were covering all of the Olympics over the course of the 2 weeks. We had, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but Lake Placid High School, right on Main Street, was the press center for the world media for the games. They gave the kids like 5 weeks off from school. They brought all the technicians in, converted it to the press center. And we had a studio and an office on the third floor where we overtook the guidance counselor's office for those few weeks. And we had a studio there. We did nightly reports. And then we added play by play of the U.S. Russia game on that Friday evening. And then, of course, they won that. And so then we were committed to broadcast the gold medal game with Finland on the Sunday morning.
I couldn't imagine being there. I know Joey has fond memories of up there, and we've been both. All of us have been up there for several events, but that had to be unbelievable. The high you guys must have felt doing those games, also.
Well, there was tension in the building, there was anxiety, there was excitement, there was nervousness. I mean, all of it wrapped up into one. And I firmly believe that I don't think that team could have won that game and that gold medal had they not been on home ice, because the support that they got from the U.S. crowd was really palpable. I mean, this is where the chant USA was created.
Right.
This is where trading Olympic pins occurred. And it occurred on Main Street, up and down the street, because the street was closed to traffic. So it was all people. It was pedestrian walkway. And so there were several firsts here. And but the fact that the Russians completely took this game for granted because they just won 10-3, right? 2 weeks before.
Yeah.
And all the stars aligned. The U.S. was playing with their A game on that ice. Jim Craig was, had the game of his life.
Lights out.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. And the Russians downplayed the U.S. team. I mean, they downplayed the Americans to the point where, if you recall, at the end of the game, they needed a goal to tie, and they didn't even pull the goaltender.
Yeah.
They were just so unprepared for that situation. And even earlier in the game, after the first period, they pulled the best goaltender in the world, Tretiak, out of the net. And I think Tikhonov, the coach, felt, you know what? The hell with it. I'll beat him with my second team goalie. And after one period, it was 2-2. So there was a lot of stuff going on. Everything fell perfectly into place. And the next thing you know, we had a miracle.
Yeah. I like the Kurt Russell's portrayal of Herb Brooks.
Oh, it was awesome. I mean, first time I saw him in the movie, I had chills.
Yeah.
I mean, this was Herb Brooks. But even more so about that movie, if you took a look at other characters, the character that played Tikhonov, the coach, spitting image.
Yeah.
The person that played Steve Januzak, the backup goaltender to Craig, spitting image. It was really the first. I mean, I've seen that movie a number of times, and my daughter is almost 35, and it's her favorite movie ever, and she can recite passages from the movie. So that's how much of an impact it had on her, and of course, I think, and a lot of people when that movie came out in 2005.
Sure. The point I was making was the line in the movie where Herb Brooks looks over at the bench and at the other bench, and they're like, "Why isn't he pulling the goalie?" And he's like, "He doesn't know what to do."
Exactly.
He's
They've never had to pull the goalie.
Yeah.
They won so many gold medals consecutively.
Yeah.
They were virtually unbeatable. That why would you even consider practicing with 6 skaters?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very bizarre.
It's funny because being a longtime coach, every now and again, a close friend of mine who's around me for a lot of games, whenever we see, I mean, nothing will ever compare to Miracle on Ice, but whenever we see an upset happening and you start getting those like, why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? We both look at each other and say, he doesn't know what to do. And it comes from that. It comes from Miracle on Ice and Herb Brooks.
Yeah, you got to be prepared. You just don't ever know how a game is going to develop, and you got to be ready for all circumstances. And the Russians just felt they're just going to show up and put the American boys to rest. And the telltale sign was at the end of the first period, trailing 2-1, when it looked like the period was over. Everybody was skating to the locker rooms, with one exception. Mark Johnson figured he would just play to the buzzer, and he scored with 1 second left.
That's right.
And everybody was headed to the bench. Even Eruzione said, there goes Johnson. I'm saying to myself, where's he going? Period's over. Well, it really wasn't. And I remember clearly, I saw the goal go in. I called the goal, and I looked up immediately at the clock, and it said 0-1. And now you have to remember, these are the days when there were no replays like that to verify. They were not timing the closing stages of a game to the 10th of a second like they have been lately.
Right.
So you're just thinking, okay, is the official going to overturn this or what? I mean, it was so clear that it still said 1 second, and then it was upheld, and we thought, wow, a goal with 1 second left to tie the game, and then start the second period with the backup goaltender. I am saying, there's something weird going on here. And probably that should have been, the first harbinger that we saw that something was in the wind.
I was only 10, Sandy, sitting in the crowd with my father. But the one thing that I can recall, I do, because that goal happened right in front of, I was in section 14. It happened at that end of the ice. And I do remember that. But the only other thing that I can really remember were those USA chants. And I don't think anybody left the arena in between the periods, in the first and second and third periods. It just felt like nobody went to the bathroom. Nobody went to get food. Nobody did anything. We're batting beach balls around. And I just remember the sense of excitement, like, especially you get that goal at the end of the first period, that 8,000 to 10,000 people in there are all of a sudden thinking, holy shit, could this happen? You know, and I think that's what everybody felt like. Holy cow, this could happen. Even down 3-2 going into the third.
Right.
This can happen.
Yeah. I mean, the team was playing good, and the Russians made the fatal mistake of keeping the underdog alive well into the game. And, the third and fourth goals came almost rapid fire. The tying goal and then Ruggione's winner. And then you got 10 minutes, you got to wait out. And I'm thinking to myself at the time, we know the firepower that the Russians have. I mean, how many of those guys went on and played in the NHL afterward? And I'm thinking, it's 3-3 now. Okay, Ruggione scored at 4-3. There's 10 minutes left. This game could end up with the Russians winning 7-4. I mean, that's how powerful these guys were. But as the last 10 minutes ran down, the Russian chances were fewer and fewer and fewer. And Craig was playing better and better. So it just was wild. I mean, at the end, to see how it turned out and the call that we had on the air, it was just something that almost was another movie-like thing.
So who was your partner?
My partner was a school teacher at the time, a good friend of mine named Tom Fish, who's now retired, living in Florida. And Tom was a coach at Saranac Lake High School, and he was a social studies teacher. And we did a lot of games together. I mean, I recruited Tom when I got hired at WNBZ in '74, and then we started calling local high school games. I said, I need somebody to work with me. And, I befriended Tom. He knew the game, and, he and I had a good rapport. We were good friends. And, I asked him, would you like to work for $5 a game? Literally. And he said, unfortunately for him, he said yes.
Didn't know what he was getting himself into.
Yeah, well, but no, he was a valued partner, and he kept the stats. He kept, all the pertinent information. He was keeping an eye on stuff going on away from the puck and leaving me to concentrate on what the puck was doing and who had it. And so no, we had a great time, but we worked 6 years together doing Saranac Lake High School games and Lake Placid High School games. And then, we had the game against the Capitals that obviously elevated the situation for us, and then the pre-Olympic tournament. And then, Tom and I just did what we did in that Miracle on Ice hockey game, and then 2 days later against Finland.
So one of the things, an article I read about you, Sandy, so the 45th anniversary, I think it was WPTC Channel 5 in Plattsburgh, did a story on you where the Miracle on Ice, the other broadcast.
Yeah.
That's what you're known as, is
the other broadcast.
but it wasn't until I saw that show. I guess I would have, when I heard the stories that there was a radio, I had no idea that there was a radio broadcast of this game. And
well, you're only 10 years old.
Right. but when I did find out, I guess the first thing I immediately thought was was this just local, or was or did did a national syndicate pick it up and feed it across the United States?
No, it was strictly a local broadcast. It was the only live broadcast that originated from a U.S. broadcast outlet. Now, to be fair, CTV up in Canada, they broadcast the game live. U.S., Russia, they called it live across Canada and the upper quadrant of the United States, if you could get the, CTV on cable. So there was CTV, but other than that, in the US, it was ABC on delay and WNBZ 1240 AM, 1,000 watts live.
And we forget about that. I mean, I was at the game live.
Right.
Pete and Dave couldn't watch the game for 3 hours after.
Right.
And so I wouldn't even have even thought of that, hey, we can turn it on and listen to Sandy live, and we'll watch the game later.
That's what happened in my house. I had 3 friends of mine from New York that came up and stayed with us for like that second week of the Olympics. They watched Eric Heiden win medals, in speed skating. They saw some other events, but, they saw hockey. And 2 of the 3 guys had tickets for the Miracle on Ice. They went to the game. The third member of the group that came up didn't have tickets, but he stayed at our house and he watched the game with my parents on CTV with the sound turned down and the radio turned up. So I felt honored.
Well, I've been so excited about talking to you about this, because obviously I was at the game, but even if I wasn't at the game, to know that we're talking to somebody that broadcasts this game is really cool. And I guess so. In the legend of this, obviously we always think about Al Michaels. Did you have any run-ins, or do you and Al know each other?
No, absolutely not. Never.
No,
we've never met. But it's amazing how 2 professionals could have calls that were pretty similar. I mean, I kid people. I said both of us use the M word and we both use the B word, miracle and believe. We just used it in, different phraseology. And he had a few more people that heard it than I did.
Is your broadcast available to listen to?
Yeah, I've got it preserved on compact disc.
But I mean, is it available? Is it available online or anything?
No.
Yeah, I listened to it.
Well, you could. I don't think you listened to all of it.
Oh, not the whole broadcast.
There was a clip out there recently that I think you saw
on Yahoo Sports. Yeah,
and it's like I've got like a 1 minute, because I get asked this pretty regularly, especially as we get closer to the next Winter Olympics. I kind of get a new life every 4 years, and so I've got that, but I've got a 1 minute audio file of the Miracle on Ice with the punchline. This is a miracle. I can't believe it. It's a miracle, and then the countdown, and then the scene setter kind of as time expires, and that's I think, Dave, what you're referring to.
Yeah.
But just amongst us, I've been in touch with people from Netflix. There'll be a documentary coming out on the hockey team coming out next winter, and they've expressed some interest in listening to my calls of the game. So we'll see what ends up on the cutting room floor and what ends up making it to air.
I know 3 of us right here would love to hear that game.
Yeah,
and I'd even put it on our YouTube page. I mean, that as an audio, that would give me chills. As guys, we broadcast a lot of basketball games, and we're never on TV.
Right.
We're always on air. We're on Facebook and stuff like that. We've
Well,
called games for high school, and
Pete, take a look at the four of us, right? We've got the perfect faces for radio.
oh yeah, 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 yeah. Almost the same hairstyles too.
Almost,
Sandy.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Between the four of us, we could use one haircut.
That's
Yes.
that's right.
This
But
one.
if I could ever get my hands on the yeah, if I could ever get my hands on a copy of that, I would put it to use. I really would on our show.
Well, we may be able to make something like that happen.
Okay. All right. That
Oh,
sounds great.
It
and
sounds like you're willing to do the dirty work that I wasn't willing to do. So,
Always. Yep. Yep.
Sandy, this show has a history of being involved in documentaries. So, you know, if you can get us mixed up with this one, that would be great. We were able to help the Bodacious Bears get off the ground a little bit with some stuff. So, would love to get involved, see anything that has to do with this in a documentary.
okay. And also, keep in mind, I mean, it's a few years out, but time goes quickly. Um, there'll be a big to do here for the 50th anniversary of the Winter Olympics. Miracle on Ice obviously is going to be a big part of that, and there were unfortunately the Miracle on Ice drowned out a lot of great stories in 1980, and rightfully so. I mean, let's face it, but some of those stories will come to life again in 2030 when the 50th party takes place here.
Cool.
So you guys need to come here, set up shop, do some live stuff.
We've been known to.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've done
yeah.
we have done shows from Lake Placid.
Yeah, see that? So you've already set the standard. Not like you're reinventing anything. So you're officially invited.
I've
Again.
kind of made it a habit now. Every year, February 22nd, I try to be in Lake Placid, and obviously the 40th and 45th. I was there last year or this year on the 45th.
Right.
So yeah, I've been thinking about the 50th. I'm like, they're probably, I would assume they're going to make a big deal out of it.
Oh yes, yeah, that it will be. It will. I don't know exactly how and what's being planned. I know one element that's being planned, which I can't really say too much about at this point. But yes, it'll be a big to do come the 50th anniversary.
Awesome.
So, Sandy, not to be anticlimactic, but what were some other highlights of your broadcasting of the Olympics that year?
Well, let's see. We had a radio crew of 5 announcers, and I divvied up all the assignments. I had somebody go out and cover bobsled and luge. I had somebody cover speed skating. I had somebody cover ski jumping. So we divided up all the responsibilities. And in addition to covering hockey, I covered alpine skiing. I mean, I've always been kind of an alpine skiing nut. So I gave myself that assignment. And there were some really cool stories that developed out at Whiteface Mountain. There was the great Swedish ski star Ingemar Stenmark, who won Olympic gold medals in slalom and giant slalom. And in the slalom, Phil Mayer, the American, won the silver medal. He was leading the first run. Halfway through, he had the lead. But he was overtaken in the second run, got the silver medal. And it occurred less than a year after he crashed at Whiteface Mountain, and they put 7 screws in his ankle. So he raced that way.
I remember the story.
He got his Olympic silver medal. And 4 years later, in Sarajevo, I was working actually with the U.S. ski team, and Phil won the slalom gold.
Right.
And I was glad I was there to see it. And his brother, Stephen Mayer, won the Olympic silver medal. So
Nice.
that kind of was kind of personally satisfying for me to see that. But yeah, so Whiteface Mountain, we had that story. The great downhill skier Franz Klammer, the Austrian who won gold in '76, the most decorated downhill racer in history, was beaten out for a spot on the Olympic team by a dark horse that nobody had heard of. And he was beaten out in the training runs. His times were faster in training, and he got the start over Clommer. Clommer was on the sidelines, and the skier actually not only beat out Clommer, but on race day he beat everybody and got an Olympic gold medal.
No
So
kidding.
there was that. Yeah. So there was a lot of really interesting stuff. We had Eric Heiden with his 5 gold medals. I'll tell
Right.
you an interesting story. I mentioned earlier that the press center was Lake Placid High School,
Right.
and our studio was up on the 3rd floor in the guidance counselor's office. Well, we had a reporter down on the ice level because the Olympic speed skating oval was right below Lake Placid High School, right on Main Street. So he would be down there covering it on the scene at ice level. The rest of us would walk down the hallway, go into the boys' room of the high school, raise the window, and watch Eric Heiden race on the ice below us. So, this stuff never happens anymore. Like, this was the last of those kind of smaller, more intimate, more hometown kind of Winter Olympic Games, because since then the games have exploded. I've been to 8 Winter Olympics, and each one has gotten progressively bigger and bigger and
Bigger and bigger, more
But what happened
spectacle.
here, with all the venues being in close proximity, I mean, Whiteface is 10 miles away. That was the furthest venue away. Now they're just scattered so far afield that you can't see multiple events anymore in one day, because it just isn't the ability logistically to travel back and forth.
Right. You're talking about Eric Heiden. My wife's from Alabama, and we live up here in upstate northern New York now. I took her to Lake Placid to go skating on the oval, and she's big into history and loves sports and stuff. So I said, this is where Eric Heiden did his thing, and she goes, "Where?" I said, "On the ice on the ice that you're skating on right now." She thought that was maybe like a practice rink
Right.
or something.
Yeah.
I said, "No, this is the actual ice." And then I said, that's the high school. I said, which was the media center during the Olympics. And of course, over here you've got the Olympic Center with the hockey rink and all that stuff. But yeah, she was just in awe of, well, and so was I. I mean,
Yeah.
to think I'm skating on the same ice that Eric Heiden, made history.
Yeah, I mean, people don't believe that they can actually step onto that ice where Hayden skated.
Yeah.
You should see the look, especially kids, when they go into the Olympic Center and they're playing a hockey tournament on that ice.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, funny story. After 1980, when the games had ended, then the high school schedule resumed. And
Yeah.
Lake Placid High School won the state title in 1980 on that ice against Ithaca High School. Yep. And Tom and I called that one as well.
Oh, cool.
So Sandy, believe it or not, I did my due diligence. I had that written down. You beat me to it. and
Sorry.
The reason I knew about it. So in 2017, I'm the athletic director at St. Lawrence Central. And in 2017, my boys team played in the state championship game, the D2 state championship game, and it was in Buffalo. Mm-hmm. And so I'm walking around the arena pregame, and they have a banner of all the former winners. And so I'm looking at it, and I'm looking for teams that I recognize, and I see 1980 Lake Placid. And I'm like, no way. That would have happened within a month after the Olympics. I'm like, they really won the state. And now you're telling me they won the game on the exact same ice? I didn't realize the game was there.
Yeah, I was up in our same broadcast position.
No kidding.
Yeah, same broadcast position. And it was actually, Joey, it was about 3 weeks after the Olympics that this went down.
Wow.
And honest to God, it was just like, how would you like to be those kids? especially kids from Lake Placid, on the same ice where the miracle and the gold medal took place, and now they skate and they win their state championship there. I
That
mean,
that
you
is
can't write that stuff.
You can't
no,
write it. That's what I was
it,
just going to say. You can't make that up.
No.
it was just amazing to me when I saw. Well, number one, I'm like, for somebody like myself that keeps track of it, I'm like, how did I not already know this? How did I not know this? And now you're telling me, and it sounds even more. I'm like, I'm surprised that there hasn't. I mean, are we saw there should be a 45th anniversary of that.
Yeah, really.
I mean, that's amazing to me that those guys on the same ice 3 weeks later won a state championship. That's amazing.
Yeah, and some of those guys, they're still in town. You see them from time to time. Unfortunately, a couple of them have passed on, but there's a bunch of them that still that are still here, and every now and then they'll pop up on Facebook and do some reminiscing.
Well, I was going to ask because I knew once you mentioned that you were doing Lake Placid hockey, I kind of got the sense, well, he probably did this state championship game, but I was going to ask him, like, what kind of letdown you must have had a letdown after doing the 80 Olympic game. You're probably thinking, I'll never make a call like this ever again.
Well, had that game occurred maybe 3 or 4 days after the Olympic gold medal, I probably would have been fighting the letdown. But this was 3 weeks later, and there was time to kind of recover and get back into the more normal work mode. And the way I figured it also, those kids, they worked as hard as the U.S. hockey team. And, if you're going to broadcast a game and you have to show respect to the effort that those kids put in to get themselves to that position. So, I felt actually the need to match what they did with preparation and with the call that would make those kids proud to listen back to it maybe years later.
Well, I'm looking at my watch here. 40 minutes we've covered on this. And I think we introduced you as also being the voice of Clarkson hockey. Can you talk a little bit about your Clarkson hockey stint?
Yeah, I was there 3 seasons. I was there from 87 to 90. And, that was, obviously a level above high school and above junior. I was fortunate enough to meet some, terrific people in the days that I called Clarkson games. But, right after 1980, I actually started calling games at St. Lawrence University. And then later on, I took a job in Potsdam as sports director there at the 2 radio stations. And one of my jobs was to be with Clarkson hockey home and away all season. Being a much younger guy then, I could, connect with the coaches and with the players probably a lot easier than if I were there now. But, it was a lot of fun. I started my first year, the head coach was Cap Rader, who, had a terrific career as a goaltender at the University of New Hampshire. And at the end of my first year at Clarkson, Cap moved on. He took an assistant coaching position with the LA Kings. And so unfortunately, our time together was limited. And when Cap moved on to LA, Clarkson hired Mark Morris over from St. Lawrence. He had been an assistant coach there, and he was brought over, and I was there for 2 years of Mark's tenure. And he was to this day I see him once in a blue moon now because he's out of coaching. He used to coach here at Northwood School in Lake Placid most recently, but he was a fiery guy. He was pretty intense and what he expected of his players, but he certainly turned out great teams and great hockey players. I mean, 3 years into his stint at Clarkson, and they were playing in the Frozen Four. So that was a credit to him. But I left Clarkson and Potsdam in 1990, got married. My wife is off to the side here off camera. Well, our daughter, came along shortly thereafter. And so that was kind of my exit, if you will, from the world of play-by-play sports.
And what are we doing at present, Sandy? Just enjoying the retired life or still active?
No, I'm still working. I'm semi-retired. I'm involved with a four diamond property here in Lake Placid called the Mirror Lake Inn.
Yep.
I do PR and social media for them. I work just enough to stay out of trouble. And keep my mind occupied. A lot of time to play golf, and I do some other work. With a couple of local foundations that have asked me to come on and be a communications consultant specialist, if you will. So I'm not overworked, but I've got just enough to force me to stay organized.
Ever find time to have a sit down and let the legend Tony Strack serve you a drink?
Yeah, I see Tony from time to time. I wander over there at the Dancing Bears Lounge. He's a fixture. He's a big St. Lawrence Central hockey guy, as we know,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
He spent a few years there.
Yes, he did.
I know he's a big fan of Derek Lalonde, and he's very happy where Derek now has landed. And maybe that'll make a difference. The Leafs can maybe get a little further along the playoffs in the future. But yeah, I do bump into Tony and some of the other cohorts, from time to time. It's always a fun bunch to bump into here. I enjoy those guys.
Well, Sandy, it was just awesome listening to the reminiscing and your part in the Miracle on Ice, because a lot of the stuff that you told Pete and Dave and our audience, I didn't know, and I'm sure that we didn't know either. And it was awesome. I have tried and tried to track you down, and finally we got it to happen. So we were really happy to be able to have this conversation with you.
No, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I always enjoy talking about, those days of, a number of decades ago. And maybe as we wrap this up, just a couple of things when people ask me about the Miracle on Ice, the main points I try to make, especially given what was going on in the world at that time. It was hard times. We were rationing gas. We had a hostage crisis. It was not all rosy at that time. And I very much felt that, that game was more than a game. They didn't realize it, but the nation was latching onto them. The country needed something positive at that time, and they found it with the hockey team. But Herb kept those guys so sequestered from the media that they never really understood it until the tournament was practically over. Herb was the only guy who went to press conferences during the tournament.
Right.
Then when it ended, of course, then it was open season. And I've often felt that when they write history books that our kids read and learn from in school, because of all that went on in 1980, this achievement should be in those books. There's no question in my mind, because it's the greatest sports moment in American history, the way I look at it.
No doubt.
And, to have future generations learn about not only what they achieved on the ice, but what they meant to the country off the ice was significant. I mean, I saw bumper stickers afterward that said, "Free the hostages, send in the hockey team."
Yeah.
Okay, that's how important it was. And the other thing, I was asked about future American teams and, when will we win another gold medal and so on and so forth. And I firmly believe that we will win a hockey gold medal, men's hockey gold medal. Um, it'll happen. We can't predict, but it will happen. There's no question because since 1980, that achievement spurred a growth in the game that you can see it from the 80s to the 90s to the current time. I mean, you can find great hockey players now pretty much in every corner of the country. You don't need to necessarily come from a cold weather climate. You don't need to come from Boston or Minnesota or New York, whatever. The game now has grown that much. And I tell people, I said, we will win a gold medal. There's no doubt we're going to win a gold medal, but it will not be like this one here.
Very true. Very true. Well, Sandy, I don't know where the time went. This time flew. It seems like we've been talking for hours, and it's only been 50 minutes. We'd love to have you back on. How about that for the
Sure.
50th?
Oh, the
And
50th, yeah.
And
Yeah.
we'll hopefully we'll all get together up there and we'll
I was
get a
gonna
hold
say,
of you and we can.
I'll sit next to you for the 50th.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Sounds good to us.
let's make that a point.
All right, sounds good.
Hey guys, thank
Sandy,
you very much for having me.
Yep, thank you again. We really appreciate it.
No, the pleasure was mine. Thank you so much.
That's going to be it here for tonight on ESS, Empire State Sports and the Wise Guy Sports Talk Show for Joey, Dave, and myself, and our very special guest, Sandy Caligiore. Good night, everybody. Stay safe.